that aren't follow the NEPA guidelines. And that means if an idea comes up that needs a purpose and need as approved, it needs alternatives, including a no bill. It needs to talk about the affected environment. And once you have your preferred alternatives, you also have to say what are the environmental consequences to the air, the soil, and water. And now you tell me how you're going to mitigate for it. Those NEPA documents are small, like a CE, category exclusion, to middle size as an environmental assessment, or large as an environmental impact statement. The last would be what I-69 is. And that might be something you might want to talk about tonight. But what I want to say about the text that's given to you is that Rachel Carson, going back in '62, she wrote the famous book called Silent Spring. She got everybody excited, as well as John F. Kennedy. And then Adlai Stevenson, who was our ambassador to the United Nations, went to the United Nations in the '60s and said, hey, our globe is like a spaceship. And we really have to take care of our air and our water, our food. I mean, it's for our own health. I mean, if we don't take care of these things, who's to say we'll survive? So it is my thought that since it's been 50 years since the National Environmental Policy Act has started, that we would be in greater jeopardy today if that did not happen. And I think you will realize that when this evening's over with. So that's pretty much on the one side with the text. If you turn it over to the colored side, this is where we're going to have some fun. And I'm going to ask if Dr. Mark Browning would like to be Alex Trebek. Would you like to be Alex
All right,
Trebek?
I'll be glad to if it's gentle.
I'm asking Dr. Browning because we're in the Browning conference room here. And I believe it's named after his mom and dad, maybe. I'm not certain. But I've been with Dr. Browning. He's an extremely intelligent, very funny, outgoing person. And if you could be over here at the mic and act like Alex Trebek, that would be really good. And I'm the storyteller, and Alex Trebek is the one that gets feedback from all of you. Okay? What they are to do, Mark, is to give you, I will take one of these categories in the left column for a certain amount of money on the horizontal row on the top. So if someone said section 7, endangered species for 400, that would be the spot-tailed dart. And I would tell a story. Okay? Does that make sense to you? And they'll be two short stories of a minute or 3 or 4.
All right, first person that wants to pick a category. This is not real money. This is
I have no money. I have no money.
so it's a figment of your imagination, the money, but the other part will probably be real. Everybody's shy. Oh, yes, ma'am. Pretty lady in the front.
Transportation for 100.
Transportation for 100. That would mean I will read it. This is right up his alley, I think. You're not, he didn't tell you to put this up. Okay. I-69 North, which is a highway just west of here, about 7.4 miles, east of here, sorry. North tree mitigation.
There's a lot of things to talk about I-69. I've worked on it for many, many years. But what I want to talk to you about is the mitigation that NDOT, the Federal Highway, agreed to. For tree mitigation alone, they purchased somewhere near 5 to 6 million trees. And when I say purchase, of that purchase, they were able to purchase existing forests and preserve them in perpetuity. That means forever and ever and ever. So about 2/3 of that 5 to 6 million trees were there. And why did we pick them there? Because we know there's endangered species there. So those trees will be untouched and there will be no development. And the other third of that 5 to 6 million trees are the ones we planted. That as they grow and prove to be successful, and that site is proven to be successful, then they will be kept in perpetuity and no development. And all the wetlands and all of the prairies and all of the stream banks that were protected. The mitigation package was something that really NDOT Federal Highway received the national recognition for. So of the 142 miles from Evansville up to Indianapolis, in 6 different sections, there were 6 different mitigation packages. And where we purchased properties, either on a conservation easement or from fee simple, they were areas that were biologically attractive that we could add to nicely. So really, the story with it is 5 to 6 million trees will be untouched forever and ever, which make up they come from about 90 to 100 different properties from the beginning to the top. So that's a very good story when you want to talk about climate change, right?
Yeah.
We need trees. So I'm very proud to be a part of talking to those 90 to 100 property owners. And whether they were in favor of I-69 or not, they were in favor of that conservation program. They liked that. They can hunt, they can fish, they can do anything, but they cannot cut down any trees. Those trees are protected. Yes?
Do they still own the land?
Now, it's a conservation easement. The property owner still owns the land, but it's deeded so that he can't do anything as cutting down trees. Good question. In some cases, NDOT bought the property outright, which is fee simple. So it's a little bit of both. Okay.
If they sell the land, nobody can,
Nope.
even if they sell it.
They sell the land, the deed goes with the land. So can you imagine what those trees are going to look like in 50 years? Well, I'm kind of happy about that.
Okay, next person. Yes, ma'am.
Section 7, endangered species for 300.
Okay, endangered species for 300. If it's, it says here, rusty-backed bumblebee monarch.
In a monarch butterfly, and you see BFF after it. Well, I typed in BF for monarch butterfly, but I thought I'd add another F, and you know why?
Exactly.
You know what it is. Best friend forever. So I just had butterfly, and I put an F, so I thought that was kind of cute. But it goes along with the mitigation, and we build a lot of prairies as connected to our wetlands that have a lot of prairie plants that are great for the pollinators, like the rusty-backed bumblebee and the monarch bumblebee. And years ago, there were some people that actually made milkweed pods, seed pods, that you could actually throw out. And milkweed is a wonderful, wonderful plant for not only the bees, but also too for the butterflies. So that story, in 2018, just as we were finishing Section 6 of I-69, the rusty-backed bumblebee became a federally endangered species. And I had to study that, and we looked at records, old records and new records. And the only records that really came up were north of Indianapolis. So we learned a lot about it, and it will come into play in regards to some projects, especially north of Indianapolis.
Anybody else? Gotta play the game now. Misha, yes, ma'am.
For 300 planning tools, planning for downtown IU school court center in Hartford County.
Boy, things are changing downtown, aren't they? And I'm so happy in the leadership. And that's what's happened in the last, this, what we're going over, I just want you to be happy. I want you to say in 35 years, good things have happened. And I'm really proud of the leaders from 10, 20, 30 years ago and the leaders today. Rather than to have extended sprawl, they really have done a nice job in developing downtown Evansville. From the apartments that are going up to the arena, to the school, and so many other things. So I can only thank the planning and other administrative people in the city for what they've done.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Jerry?
Planning tools for 400.
Okay, that, you have to read it here. Renewable energy sources, wind, solar, geothermic, and hydroelectric.
There's been a lot of talk recently about global warming and carbon dioxide as the greenhouse gas that's causing for the rise in temperature and the changes in weather patterns. If you look at what Pope Francis in his encyclical of 2015, it's called Laudato Si', he talks about we need to be considering renewable types of energy sources. And this planning, God bless you, this planning square is simply saying, can we not look at hydroelectric? We're sitting on the Ohio River. I know that wind turbines are being proposed. I know, God bless you, I know the solar panels are they're going up more and more. These are renewable sources. I'm not saying to do away with coal. It's just for the consideration of the community. Can we look at renewable sources as well as non-renewable? But if we have non-renewable, is it possible not to take that carbon dioxide that comes off in the burning of coal into the air? There is a way of putting it into the ground. So tonight, I want you to learn that there's ways of sequestering, capturing carbon dioxide, not only just through plants, but through soil and through wetlands. So, there's a lot of ways that we can get that carbon dioxide down. So that's what that square is all about. It will change the look of Evansville in the future, but it will help improve air quality.
Next one. Next one. Yes, sir.
Planning tools for 800.
Say again.
Planning tools for 800.
Okay, planning tools for 800. He's a high spender here. Training for north end disasters, fire, hazardous material, earthquake, and tornadoes. I'll repeat again. Training. How do we train for disasters, fire, hazard, earthquake, and tornadoes?
Well, back in the late 1980s, I was the chairperson for the Hazardous Material Task Force for Vandenberg County. And some of you may remember there were a lot of mock demonstrations we had, 4 consecutive years under my leadership and others with the LEPC and the EMA here in town. We actually developed certain situations, incidents, and then we responded to them. And then we evaluated our performance. So we learned from each of those 4. So what I'm saying here is we need to look into the future. And we have had earthquakes, we have had tornadoes, certainly fires, and the fire departments are doing wonderful. Hazardous waste, keep having mock demonstrations and practicing. When I had a mock demonstration, there was 50 to 70 different organizations that would respond. It's amazing. Of all the people that have to be there. Law enforcement of all different sorts from the city, the state, the county. And then you have the hospitals. And then you have air flight, life flight. You have so much when you're trying to evacuate people and so forth. So I'm just saying in the planning process is we're doing really, really good. It's just that, let's consider it more, that's all. Cannot hurt to keep training for different things that could arise in the future. Does that make sense to you? That's all I'm saying. And it's not that we aren't doing good now. As a matter of fact, those 4 mock demonstrations actually got different people together from the volunteer fire departments with the city fire people, exchanging things, helping, getting to know each other. And then when that tornado came through, I think it was in 2005, a deadly tornado, they responded really well, as best as they could. Why did they do that? Because they worked together for years. We just have to keep working together.
And Tom, if there was an earthquake and some of the big plumbing system, I think, goes down Columbia Street, so that hits Midtown Deaconess, and then if also where St. Mary's is, I think it's probably on quicksand, and then out by Gateway and the other area, that's also quicksand. So if we lose our 3 hospitals, and then you can't get across Pigeon Creek, and how do people get across Pigeon Creek if we have a bad earthquake, can you address those things?
Well, I can't personally because I'm not the person that is the expert. But I would say that I am very good at orchestrating to get the experts together to talk about it and to come up with different ideas. Because, we do have to have shelters, and we do have to expect certain things, and we need to know how we respond. It's called preparedness. So Dr. Mark Browning came up with a good question. My first answer to him is with what he said, I'd get the right people together, the LEPC, the EMA, the mayor, and others to talk about it and see what we can do if that were to happen. The next, please, next story.
Yes, sir. Give me a number.
Section 7, endangered species for 700.
700 endangered species, so we're talking about that green box. It says eastern box turtle and turtle dogs.
Yeah. Well, this is something real special. As part of I-69, IDNR requested an NDOT federal highway to try to do something about finding the eastern box turtle and other turtles in the right-of-way and removing them and then holding them somewhere else while the road's being constructed and then releasing them back. So I contacted John Rucker from Tennessee with his Boykin Spaniels. And he came up. And these are turtle dogs. They will go find turtles. And when they found the turtles, we put a marker and we get a GPS coordinate. And then we would mark the turtle, the plastron, with a certain number. And then Bill McCoy and Valerie up in Oakwood City, we had a fence put around the front of their yard. And for 2 to 3 years, they took care of those turtles. And I can still remember, you know, Valerie was making some chicken salad for the turtles. They liked mushrooms, they liked fruit, and they liked chicken salad. And I think Bill said, now Valerie, save some for me, you know. So I got them both a staff, and on the top of the staff, there's a turtle. So I called them the Turtle Masters. But even with all of that, you know, once they were released from their front yard, and then they were put into an enclosure in a strip-lined area for about another year or two, IDNR put radio, yes, on them, and you know, some of those turtles came right back to Bill and Valerie's house. Yes. The homing of them is just so special. It really is. So the sensitivity first in not having heavy machinery going over an area and digging up and killing animals. We found as much as we could, and then we're indebted to John Rucker and his dogs. He loves his dogs, and those dogs sure do love finding those turtles.
The next one. Yes, ma'am.
Impacts and permitting the Pigeon Creek Greenway for
What?
400.
Impact, okay, for 400, all right. Here we go, I'll repeat the question. Impact and permitting for $400, Pigeon Creek Greenway.
Well, you know, the Pigeon Creek Greenway, when it's completed, will be about 42 miles long, circumventing the city. And about right now, I think 7 to 8, maybe 7 to 8 miles have been completed. It might be more, but you know, they're just building onto it more and more and more. And at any time of when you're near a creek where there's wetlands or so forth, it requires permitting and it requires NEPA documentation, like on the top of that page. And you have to go through the process. What's interesting about that, it's really essentially a greenway circumventing the city, and it will be connected in with parks too, as appropriate. And it will be connected to, at least it's planned, to be connected to the East Side wastewater treatment plant. And some of you may say, well, why would they do that? Because it's in that area, and the East Side wastewater treatment plant is being updated now conventionally, and they're going to build a wetland outside. And that wetland outside the wastewater treatment plant will filter quite a bit of the material out before it gets into the plant. And the plant will do as it normally does, and then the effluent will go out into B Slough and into the Ohio River, but the effluent that will go out into the Ohio River will have about 80% less organic material than what it is today. So the Ohio River is a river of importance. And in that particular project, connecting the Greenway to the east side wastewater treatment plant will help a lot, so that when you're walking the path, you'll come to a platform and you'll be able to look over, and there'll be some signs there talking about what the treatment plant has changed and why it's a good thing for everybody, including the Ohio River.
Okay, next one, anybody? Yes, ma'am.
Transportation for 400.
Okay, transportation for 400. That's your top line and all the way over to 400. Heim Road, which he'll tell us where Heim Road wetlands is, and Beavers. Tell everybody where Heim Road is.
Heim Road is between Chandler and Evansville, just north of, I think that is 62. It's the road paralleling 62 to the north. And where Hine Road crosses Pigeon Creek, just north of there, it was my first wetland mitigation project. And we actually put in a very nice wetland, and then we bordered it with an elevated levee of prairie grasses and prairie plants. And then we had cuts in the levee so that water from the agricultural field could come in, but the wetland really couldn't go back out into the field. And we planted trees and shrubs and plants that would be great for pollinators. We even planted Washington hawthorn, which is a great tree for the American shrike. And, the shrike really likes to get the big insects and then hang them on a thorn and let them dry. Well, they do it on barbed wire fences. They'll even do mice. So we wanted to do that, and it just turned out really nice until I went out there and I saw an adjacent ditch that a beaver dammed it up. So I read up about that, and I put a beaver pipe in there, and the beaver pipe goes through the dam, and it's so long that it would take the beaver a lot of work to try to fill in the whole pipe. So the beaver goes away. So I just said, one for me. And I came back 2 weeks later, and that beaver and other beavers had a zigzag dam all the way across my wetland. So we came to a meeting of minds. We let them have a portion of the wetland. So, but it turned out very nice. But what I liked about Hine Road, they had some unique plants. They had the deciduous holly, of which most people haven't seen, and they also have the swamp cottonwood. So there was some really nice stuff down there. And so it was my first wetland, and I thought it turned out very nice. But it has a twist to it that the beaver took over a portion of it.
Next one. Yes, ma'am.
Transportation for 500.
Okay, transportation's the top row. For 500, it says Lynch Road Extension 4 cents. Can you tell us what part of Lynch Road we're talking about there?
Sure, right by where Pigeon Creek is, let's see, it would be between Oak Hill and Green River Road, about halfway on the south side. Pigeon Creek gets kind of close there to the road. There was an issue in the NEPA process that one agency said that there wasn't a wetland, and two other agencies said there was a wetland. So I asked the agencies if I could go in with my staff and do an analysis and then provide them the data. And we did do that, and it came out that it wasn't a wetland. So we went to Indianapolis and showed those two agencies that thought it was a wetland why we didn't think it was. They agreed. Then I called the other agency in Louisville and said that the other two agencies agree with you that it's not a wetland. And, we have all this information too. And that person said, well, I'm very glad it worked out that way. But he said to me also, he says, what happens if you found it to be a wetland? Because when we say no, it's no. And what I want to say to you is that's important to know. With the Army Corps of Engineers, when I first started in wetlands, I wanted to be able to do the things they would do so that they'd have confidence in me, that I would do it their way. So I would go out with them and learn from them, and then they had faith in me that whatever I said, it would be what they would do. And the gentleman, I remember his name, George Renewable, and I told my wife this. is we had to cross this little creek, and he had Gore-Tex boots. I didn't know what Gore-Tex was. I just had these old beat-up shoes, these boots, and I walked through the water. When I walked out, water was squirting out of my boots. And I remember George turned around and said, "You ought to get some Gore-Tex boots." So God bless you. So the answer to, the story with that is you need to work together as a team with the agencies and the consultants and do the right thing. And for that particular situation, it was not a wetland, a jurisdictional wetland that has the hydrology, the hydrophytic vegetation, and the hydrosoils.
Yes, yes.
Transportation for 600.
Okay, transportation, it's a top line for 600. Ohio Street bridges and issues, historic, so that's right by Moser Stone, I believe, and it's red, and it was Mrs. Marchand, it was dedicated to her. If that's the right bridge, you can walk across it. Can you tell us how to deal with that?
Yeah, Joan Marchand, she did so much as the historic preservation officer. So we did work on the bridge there, that's right there by the mouth of the Ohio River, and it's the Marchand Bridge. But we also worked on the Ohio Street Bridge. And where the Ohio Street Bridge, there was a pit. And when they were testing, they found that there was high metal concentrations. And I'm the kind of person that, when I first started working for Bernard and Lockney and Associates, I was doing what are called site assessments, where a banker has someone that wants to sell their property. They want to have information about the history of the property. So I would do those. And I would check with the fire insurance map, the Sanborn's fire insurance maps. I'd go to the city directory. I do everything possible to learn and then put together as to most recent what that property was, and then I take it back as far back as I could. So when I got done, I would go to Benito Vippis. Does anybody know Benito Vippis? Benito Vippis was 84 years of age back when I first started 30 years ago. Benito knew everything. Benito told me that's where they put fly ash. So it's always nice to have that expert, and it gives you confidence. And then I'd say, well, did you see anything else there? So he just helped me out so much. So I will drop names as we go through these stories because they're really important people.
And was that where we used to have all the bolts up and down Pigeon Creek right there? Is that the same place? Because 1958, I think Mr. Senator Harkey had all those moved out, 58. But we had a lot of people living there getting off free electricity from the wires. But tons, I forget what you call that area, but right on Pigeon Creek, there were tons of little boats there that people lived on for years.
Yeah, they had houseboats there, and then they were quarantined, and then ultimately they were pushed down the Ohio River.
And the last two guys, there was Peg Leg Willie across the river, and then another guy, he had about 100 dogs right across from, or in a marina, lived on the other side of the river, and he had about 100 dogs, and Peg Leg didn't have very many dogs, but they were the last living people that had moved from there, and they stayed on the river there across the river on the Ohio. Yeah. Okay.
Mitigation for 300.
Mitigation, getting to the legal categories. Mitigation for 300. Mitigation for 300 is forest, blocks, preservation.
You know, when you have to make up wood someplace, how do you do it? Well, first of all, that's called replacing what was lost, and it's replaced at a certain percent, a certain ratio. If you're taking an acre of woods, you'll multiply that by 3, and you'll need to make 3 acres of woods. Where do you do that? Well, and I'm talking about wetland woods in this case, you should be reasonably close to where the impacts were. And you look at aerials, and you look for hydric soils, you look for places that are biologically attractive, like agricultural fields, and a farmer that can't get his crops, planted 3 out of 5 years. It's a problem for him. He's not really making money off of that. An agricultural field right next to a woods, it floods too much, it stays wet too long. They're called prior converted areas. So what I do is I search for those areas that have the soil, have the hydrology, and would have the hydrophytic vegetation. If I use them, of which they're located next to a biologically attractive wetland forest existing, so that when the flood comes up in the existing, it just takes those seeds and everything else and just flushes them into my wetland too. I don't like to fight against nature. I try to work with nature. That's what this evening's about. Humanity and nature. So I want something successful, and the best way of having something successful is to find the right location, and we do that carefully. And when we do find 1, 2, or 3 different places, we take regulatory agencies out and say, we think this one of the 3 is the best, but what's your feedback? And this is what we want to do. Okay. So there's a lot of work that goes into that. And once again, they're deeded forever as a well.
Transportation for 7.
This one is transportation for 7, and I'll read it. It says concrete bridges and bat roosting. I don't think Tom knows anything about bats, but he'll try to wing it.
Well, as part of I-69, from the very bottom to the very top of the 142-mile-long road, we had 148 sampling areas within a 5-mile, 2.5 miles on both sides of an existing, not an existing, but a proposed I-69. So on I-69, 2.5 miles on both sides, there was 148 different places where we would sample for bats within a 3-month period of the year, May 15th to August 15th. And you had to do it 2 nights. And I had 6 different teams out in 6 different sections. And one of the sections, section 3, the gentleman that was in charge called me and he says, Tom, do you mind if I change that location on First Creek to a bridge over the east fork of the White River? And I said, well, why do you want to do that? And he said, because I know there's Indiana bats up there. Indiana bats are federal list of species. I said, well, let me check. And I got approval. And then once I got approval, I studied that bridge for 6 years. And we wrote a paper. And really, things worked out so well. At the very end of the observations, and I was taking temperatures, a friend of mine said, well, you could put eye buttons up there, and we can program them, and they could take temperatures every minute, every hour, every day. So they gave me these eye buttons programmed, and I put them up. And when I put them up there? The bats would not roost near them. And I thought, well, this is funny. Maybe they think it's too shiny. I don't know. But then, for 2 weeks, they didn't go near those little buttons. They were about the size of a dime. So I went back and I got a noise receiver and put it on my head, and I was listening, and then when I got to about 30 kilohertz, kilohertz, it started. It was terrible. And I was told that these eye buttons don't make noise. So anyways, you know, I told U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and we wrote a paper about it, and worldwide, those eye buttons had to be checked, and no one could use those eye buttons if they produced noise. They were assumed not to make noise. But they only affected a certain type of bat. They didn't affect some other bats. The long story short is we learned that, but we also learned that bats are a lot like people. You know how we go on vacation and we leave from point A to point B, and if it's a long ways, we stop over at a hotel. And if it's really longer, we stop at another hotel. Well, they migrate too. And they don't go the whole way, some 200 and 300 miles on just one night. They stop over, and they use these concrete bridges. They get up underneath there, get out of the elements, get food and some water, say hi to their friends. They socialize a lot. You know, when you're under the bridge with the hundreds of bats, after a while you get a little bad at yourself. You know, but it's just a precious moment to me that I could get as close to the bats all lined up here if I kept my light down like this, and they're just a chattering. You know, they look like mice with little wings. And the bad thing about that is that, you know, there was a terrible disease called white nose syndrome. Started up in New York in 2006. It finally made its way into Indiana in 2011. And it's estimated about 6 to 7 million bats are dead. And the Indiana bat was hurt. So too was the Florida long-eared bat was hurt. Any bat that liked to cuddle next to its own, it just transferred this fungus to the next one. And so it's a sad state of affairs. I used to be able to go out and sample and have 13 different bats in a night. They're lucky to get one now, or 2 or 3. And they're all of the ones that don't cuddle, the ones that are isolated, you know, the ones that stay by themselves. So I wrote this paper. I'll leave with this. It took 8 years to finally get the paper published. I sent it to a real good endangered species journal, and they said it didn't have new information. I sent it to a regional one. They didn't accept it either. I sent it to the state. The state said, oh, yes. Once it got published in the state, guess what? I got an email from Geneva, Switzerland, saying, we like your paper so much, we'd like to put it in the worldwide database. So I wanted to go worldwide to begin with, but nobody seemed to want it. I wanted to go regional, they didn't seem to want it. I went state, they wanted it, and then it ended up being worldwide. I just wanted the information out because Indiana was doing some wonderful things. And Virginia and so many other states were following us. And why is this important? It's because these bats use these concrete bridges on their way to their summer habitat from their winter habitat. When they get out of their cave, and it's at the end of March, they'll start coming to these bridges, certain bridges, and they'll stay there for a certain time, and then they'll go someplace else. And we put tags on them, and we've gotten bats that we had tags on down in Maringo Cave. Not Maringo Cave, Wyandotte Cave, down by Louisville. We've got them up in Ray's Cave. So they move around a lot. And the last thing I'll say is, who cares? Who cares about these? You don't ever see them. But you know, when you lose 6 to 7 million bats, they were providing you a benefit. You just didn't see them. they're out at night eating all these insects. And some insects they're eating are agricultural pests that will defoliate and affect the crop. And without them, now the farmer has to spray pesticides. So with the loss of all these badges, it is projected that farmers will need to spend about $74 an acre to kill the insects for that acre that the bats did. So to me, I enjoyed being with them, and I learned a lot from them. And I thought it was pretty special that they keep coming back to this bridge year after year after year. Just like those turtles, they go home. Well, they're looking for that bridge. Somebody takes that bridge away, I don't know what they do. Okay?
Next one. Yes, ma'am.
Transportation for 800.
Okay, she said transportation for 800, and it says Main Street, Complete Street.
Yeah, this is something I didn't really work on, but my friend did at the company, Dave Isley. And this is a very nice way of complementing, people walking, people bicycling, and also having vehicular movements. And also, too, they allow for drainage that allows to go to the groundwater. There's pervious surfaces used on occasion, there's rain gardens. See, we pave over so much stuff, and water can't get down through it that it runs off. And when it runs off, it just ends up getting into a creek, and the creek goes up really up high, and then it's just all this power, it just eats off the bank. What a complete street does is it allows for the percolation of the water down into the ground table. And it also allows people to walk, bicycle, and of course drive. And as long as it's done all safely, that's what the cities are going for. That's really a neat project.
Yes. Well, yes, ma'am.
Planning tools for 500.
Okay, planning tools for 500. So that'd be the last yellow for 500. The statement is parks and recreational lands connected to the PC Greenway, Wesselman Woods.
We're blessed to have Wesselman Woods. It's about 200 acres. And I have to throw this in too. No one has picked up on how wetlands also, it's smaller than Wesselman Woods, but it is overseen by Wesselman Woods, how wetlands. Back in the day of ASTAR, when they came in and they wanted to use a strip of land in Riverside Park, some of you might not even remember that there was a park down there, but there is. And there's public funds that went into it. So in order for them to use that slip of land for the boating dock, a 6F conversion had to be completed. I had to find replacement parcel. So I talked to Ted Grannon. Ted Grannon worked at the zoo, and he thought any wetland that would be connected to Howe Slough, the slough is the one that has the boardwalk that goes through in the town of Howe. He says anything that can connect to that would be a real good thing. So I looked at the field, went out there, and I proposed it, all 37 or 35 acres of it, to have two wetlands and what you see today that the Army Corps actually developed. So we did that so that we had a lowland educational area to complement the Wesselman Nature Preserve in town, which was more upland. So that was really a good thing. And we also did another thing too. Sunset Park along the river, It goes all the way to Waterworks Road. And on the other side of Waterworks Road, there was this ugly piece of woods. And what we did was I wrote up that it should be put into a park so that whatever goes on in the park, it can be seen. And then put in a very nice park. Remember what it looks like? So that was another thing we did, and then we got 6 soccer fields over by Angel Mounds. So we really had more replacement parcels to that little strip of land that was needed for ASTAR. But we ultimately would like to have all of the trails connected to the parks. I think the park department has about 67 parks now in Evansville. So we're really blessed to have a lot of parks, to have Powell wetlands, to have Wesselman Woods, to have a zoo. So that's the story there.
Yes, ma'am.
Impacts and permitting for 700.
Okay, impacts and permitting for 700. It says Evansville Sports Complex.
Yes, this is something that, remember I told you about NEPA, you have the purpose and need, and in your alternatives, including a no bill. Well, it was proposed that with the raising of Roberts Stadium, that there could be baseball fields that could be built and tournaments could be played out there. I put that in there because I learned a number of things. The people in the neighborhood were concerned about the light coming from the fields, okay? And they were concerned about the noise with these tournaments. And I worked with our staff, and I learned that noise is a funny thing. When we were in Wesselman Woods at a peak hour at Lloyd Expressway, boy, we could hear those trucks and cars going all the way up to Wesselman Woods. But you know, it was actually louder at night when the cicadas were calling. And it was even louder when they blew that soccer, whatever that thing is, in the soccer fields down the way a little bit. There's a kind of like this horn that they blow. Noise is a funny thing. But anyways, what we came up with is that you can direct the noise on the grandstands themselves, of which you get a certain distance away you can't hear. So Rusty and I went down to Henderson, and there was a field that was built just like that, and we took noise readings so that we could answer that noise issue. In regards to lighting, so that we don't have the glow of light going up into the atmosphere, the lights can be directed down too, of which people are doing more. So we really found an answer to both, but at the public hearing, it was quite apparent that most people did not want that project. So I have that public information meetings are invaluable. We don't do things that people don't want. It's just simply it. We'll do one more.
Somebody that hasn't, you have, yes.
Maybe at the end here, we could talk a little bit about bottom in the next 35 years.
Yeah.
You know, I know that IU and Purdue have been doing studies on how the climate change is going to be affecting those areas.
You want to do that now? It's been 1 hour. So Alex, thank you. Oh, okay. So we have about 15 more minutes, and then I think Tom would like to finish up. The first thing is, I want you to know that the green things that kind of went over, you may not have thought you were involved in it, but you were in some way. And these are public projects, many of them. And I know I learned a lot from that. So I think that Evansville has changed a lot in 35 years. Nobody said anything about I-164, you know, the bypass to the east. Nobody said anything about the North Expressway. You know, both of those have a lot to do with minimizing and reducing air emissions from the vehicles. Matter of fact, I wouldn't have my job with the company if it weren't for I-164. If someone really badly messed up, and the owner of that company called USI and asked for a field biologist, and that was me. So I actually got a job with the company. But I just want you to know that there's been a lot of good things that have happened in the last 35 years. The Green River National Wildlife Refuge, the Patoka National Wildlife Refuge. Two beautiful refuges, one that's further along than the other. But they're great, they're absolutely great in sequestering or capturing carbon dioxide, of which this gentleman wants to get into, if we do. So let's just go down to the bottom, and these are just some considerations, people. From what I've learned so far, I think that in the next 35 years, we're going to have to do something about the coyotes in town, the raccoons, and some of the animals that kind of like are kind of getting a little bit too comfortable. I don't know what that would be, but the geese, and sometimes turkeys too. And I have a pet peeve, people, about introduced species. I honestly believe the White House syndrome was an introduced species, and it came from Europe. Now, how it got here, I cannot tell you. We know it's over there in Bax. It got here. I remember when I was a graduate student, and the gypsy moth got loose. And they just covered the defoliated trees all the way down the Appalachian Mountains. I remember putting my hand on a tree, and that's when they were spraying the leaves with Bacillus thuringiensis, that when they ate the leaf, the bacteria got in the gut and just ate the caterpillar, the gypsy moth caterpillar, just ate the guts out. I mean, they were dead on these trees. I mean, millions of them. They were all over the place. So when it comes to kudzu, Japanese knotweed, white nose syndrome, gypsy moth, we really, really can't be letting things out into the native environment where they don't belong. They're where they are for a reason. So that's what I would say in the first box there. Do something about wildlife conflicts in the future and avoid introduced species. We also need to do something about air quality issues. And we need to lower what's the parts, this is particles, 2.4, I think that's a micron size. Ozone, carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, and toxics in the air. And we need to increase the electric and hybrid vehicles, solar, wind, geo, hydro, energy sources. These are just considerations. You don't have to go all to one, but I just, before I came here, I got on the computer and said, hey, for the locks and dams, do they generate electricity? No, they don't. I don't think so. Not now, but they can be converted to do so. Maybe we can do that. I'm not the smart one to be able to say we can, but that article said you could. And they even said the Myers lock and dam would generate close to 500 megawatts, and I don't know what that means. I guess that's a lot. So I'm just saying that let's talk to the right people, and let's get together. Orchestrate getting together and talk about what does Evansville want for their energy sources in the future. And as Pope Francis says, let's go to renewable. Non-renewable, we know that's caused problems. And at the same time, we don't want to hurt coal mining. families, but if maybe maybe the government could subsidize the fact of getting the carbon dioxide out of the fumes from the coal and put it into the ground. That is doable, but it costs more money. So air quality is something we need to address. I really would like to see us do something in reducing noise, light, and visual impacts. Maybe noise barriers more often. Direct lighting, like I said, for G stands for grandstand speakers. Use the ordinances that we have as appropriate, and we need to reduce these, and CSS means context-sensitive solutions. Getting the right people together to talk about how we can have such reductions in noise, light, and visual. Water quality improvements. Improve the Ohio River, the East Side wastewater treatment plant. When they get done, they'll be discharging a lot less into the Ohio River than they do now. The Wabash River, the Pigeon Creek, and the other streams in the tri-state of effluents and various wastes, and that can be mine waste too. Eco-treatment. Eco-treatment is essentially wetland, construction of wetlands for wastewater treatment. Have plants help you in the process. And I'm going to talk about a ditch. The ditches that we have with agricultural fields on both sides, it's naked except there's a V-shaped ditch. They can take that V-shaped ditch and then move it out just a little bit, cut it down, put a shelf on both sides and cut it down and put plants on the shelves. And then the turkey farm or hog farm or whoever's generating phosphates, nitrates that run, pesticides run, they get into that ditch and they will go through all these plants. And you know what that ditch is acting like? A constructed wetland for wastewater treatment. And it's deep enough that the deer can walk on that shelf and get from that woods to that woods without being seen.
Why does that sound so reasonable and nobody's ever?
We're doing it. We're doing it. I've been to the north side, the northern part of Indiana. They did a pilot study, and Notre Dame actually did the monitoring of it. And it did wonderful. So then, for all of our projects, we promote it. So we're doing it. But some of the farmers, to answer you, and there's nothing wrong, they don't want to give up that little bit extra land. But remember, when you do what I just said, you increase the area within the cross-section, so you don't get flooding out in the field as much. You know, those fish that are stuck out in the field when the water comes back down. So, I just wanted to tell you about that. And groundwater levels. Increased use of more pervious surfaces and green spaces. Maintain water levels in creeks and monitor groundwater levels. I was very surprised, and this is not criticism, but when we were in the process of talking of raising Roberts Stadium, it was my understanding that Roberts Stadium had a basketball floor like here. Somehow someone decided to make it lower. And I'm surprised that when they made it lower, that they didn't know where the groundwater was. They got into the ground. They had to pump it all the time. That was one of the reasons for raising it, is because they lowered it down. So we really need to know where that groundwater normally exists, up and down in the soil, so that we don't go develop into it. Plant more trees. Reforest and afforest. Some of you may not know what afforest means. Reforest is you're reforesting an area that once was forest. Afforest is you're putting forest where there were no forests before. And you know, in the 1800s, people that came through Indiana said that a squirrel didn't have to touch ground from all the way of northern Indiana to southern Indiana. It could just go from tree to tree to tree. And we didn't get to that about trees yet, the sycamore story, but I'll tell it to you anyways. But anyways, plant more trees. Rain gardens, swales, parks, refuges, and other green spaces in the city, county, states. Consider flower gardens, green roofs. You know, Deacon Hospital has a green roof in a section. You know, I went to Philadelphia and I was way up high, looked down, and it was just naked tar paper on the top of everything. Wouldn't it be nice and cool to sit down if we had some green roofs or gardens up there? And even have bees up there that have in some places now. Landscaping, we need to get into the green revolution. Water issues. Use plants to filter out pollutants in water. Soil health, we need to increase it by keeping roots in the ground. And wetlands are really a great way of sequestering or capturing carbon dioxide. They're wonderful sinks. When it comes to recycling, we need to manage our hazardous waste safely. Tox away days are important, and we need to use less and throw away less. And we need to store carbon dioxide in the earth as needed. And the last thing is increase our planning efforts to prepare for things that we don't know when they'll come, if they ever come. Well, we've got some really good firemen. We've got some great law enforcement. We have great people that want to do the right thing. And I want to leave you, and you can ask questions if you want, but I want to leave you with one story. Is that I'm right here, about 10 feet would be about here. From here to here, is that about 10 feet, would you say? Sure. Okay, and to this lady right here would be about 10 feet. Okay.
Motto was simply to love what we love better. You know, all these things that we love, we have to learn about them to love them. So what Tom did tonight is exactly what we tried to do. You know, his experience, his knowledge, his love is passed on to us. So even though we weren't playing for money, we're all richer tonight. You know, and that's what it's about. So, so that's what we are about is Tri-State Creation Care 2. We first are, the things that we try to do is educate and then tell about, kind of cultivate, nurture a love for natural places, love for wildlife, and then also to be concerned about the general state of the planet, especially what we fear is a global crisis happening with our climate. And so what we want to try to do is just a little plug. We have a big event that we have every year coming up, and it's called, it's our annual conference. And we try to call it a celebration of creation. What we try to do is say, look at all these good things that we have, and these are the good things that we have to protect, and we have to learn about. So this year, we're going to have this conference again. We have a keynote, and we have followed by breakout sessions. Like one breakout session is going to be on solar energy. One is going to be Charlie Stocker, the garden guy. He's going to be talking about the soil web, you know, about the makeup of the soil, how that's so important. We have Kenzie Paul, a senior from Mount Vernon High School, who's been trained on to do a climate simulation that you can type in a little information and then receive the effects back from what's happening to climate in our area. And so it's a little bit about it, but our keynote this year is Reverend Brooks Burnt. He's the Minister for Environmental Justice for the United Church of Christ, and he's going to be speaking on the role the churches need to play in trying to raise this consciousness, especially about climate change. The title that we're giving to our conference this year is The Urgency of Now, because we are in a time period where we have to act, you know. And one of the things that we really believe is that if the churches and the people of faith don't lead the way, then we have allowed ourselves to fall into a moral failure. We have been put here to take care of these things and to help them survive. And not only that, but to enrich our lives. And so if we let something like the monarch butterfly that our great-grandchildren might not see because of the change in environment, then that is really a sad thing. So and I also think Evansville is a leader in a lot of ways. We were a leader in energy, you know. But also that energy is now beginning to shift. And what I would like to see, and many others would like to see, is that Evansville become a leader in a different way. A leader that we can look back and proudly and say that we ushered in a new energy era. We became a new leader. And that's in the area of renewables and trying to build up where we could actually contribute to lessening the impact on the planet. So one of the things that we hope to come out of this conference, we're hoping to lead to an event that will really raise the concern for renewables. And so, but to do that, we need your help. You know, first of all, you can help us by coming to our conference and listen to the message, being inspired, and then, if you can, bring a person or two along with you. And then when we present the event, I'm not quite sure, we're in the planning stages for this event, but we'd like to try to bring in the whole aspect, because Vectren right now is making an important decision about that future. And the city too needs to make that commitment to make this shift. And the only way that's going to happen is if we mobilize and we unite and become a common voice and help encourage that new age that we all want to see. So I just encourage you, come to the conference, learn, and then if you can, come help us put together this event that will speak to a new age, a new hope, a new ushering in a new consciousness that we can be proud of. So appreciate you all coming this evening. Yes, Tom?
When is that?
Okay, yeah, I'm going to leave these on the thing. It's actually Saturday, February 22nd. It runs from, doors open at 8:30. It starts at 9. It goes to noon. And it's going to be at Aldersgate United Methodist Church. And so there'll be some hospitality there. We have a lot of different displays and vendors there also. So it's kind of fun. And you meet a lot of interesting people too. Yes, Will.
Can I plug something real quick?
Yes, sir.
Hey, I'm William. You might know me, I don't know. There's a lot of great environmental organizations, you know, even locally, there's a number of them, but what we really need more of is youth participation. So some other folks are trying to start, get the Sunrise movement going. They're trying to expand. They're youth-centered, a little radical, trying to get legislation and stuff like that. Anyway, if it's supposed to be youth-centered, anybody's welcome to come and help us participate, but especially if you guys know any you have children or grandchildren, if you have classrooms or any ways to, in your networks, to spread this message. We have some little pamphlets with some ways to follow us online and stuff. So, yeah.
So again, thanks, Tom, for informative and interesting meeting. And then